Here are *** 6 main key points ** for a speech titled Avoidance can't say I love you, but this behavior reveals it all. ** inspired by Tony Robbins' psychology on emotional needs, vulnerability, identity, and relational patterns. ### 1. They show love through dependability, not words. Avoidants often avoid verbal vulnerability, but they communicate I love you through consistent presence and quiet reliability. If they're always showing up, keeping promises, or maintaining steady routines with you, it's not just habit. It's how they feel safe giving love without exposing too much. ### 2. Emotional distance is not disconnection. When an avoidant takes space, it's rarely a sign of disinterest. It's a survival mechanism to self-regulate emotional intensity. The fact that they come back, often in subtle, indirect ways, reveals that they still care deeply. The return, not the retreat, speaks volumes. ### 3. Practical help is their love language. Tony Robbins teaches that love is often expressed in the way someone meets your core needs. Avoidants often show love by fixing things, solving problems, or taking responsibility. They might not say I love you, but if they're quietly making your life easier, they mean it. ### 4. Letting you into their routine is intimacy for an avoidant. Alone time equals emotional safety. So when they start integrating you into their life, sharing space, time, or routines, it's a huge step. This merging of worlds is a silent declaration of emotional trust and love. ### 5. They choose you over their comfort zone. Avoidants prioritize control and personal space. If they sacrifice comfort to be with you, attend your events, have difficult conversations, or stay present during emotional moments, it means they care enough to face what they usually avoid. #6. Their growth shows their love when avoidants begin to stretch, opening up more, showing vulnerability, trying new ways to connect. That's not accidental. That's love in motion. As Tony Robbins says, love is about progress, not perfection. Their willingness to grow, even slowly, is a deep and lasting expression of love. Would you like these expanded into full paragraphs, or turned into a speech with timestamps and SEO features? Avoidant individuals tend to struggle with verbal expressions of love, not because they don't feel it, but because saying, I love you, often triggers discomfort, vulnerability, and a perceived loss of control. For them, love is not something to be proclaimed in words. It's something to be demonstrated through consistency and quiet dependability. That's why, even if an avoidant never says those 3 powerful words, you'll often find them showing up in other, less obvious ways. If they are reliable, if they keep their word, respond to your needs without being asked, or continue to be present in your life, that is no accident. For them, reliability is one of the safest and most meaningful ways to express their love. This behavioral pattern is deeply rooted in their emotional psychology. Avoidants typically develop their attachment style from early life experiences where expressing emotion was either unsafe, ignored, or discouraged. As a result, they learn to survive and cope by becoming self-sufficient and emotionally restrained. But that doesn't mean they don't feel deeply. It just means they've developed alternative ways to express it, ways that protect their sense of autonomy and safety. When they commit to being consistent in your life, it's their version of emotional investment. That consistency is a replacement for verbal vulnerability. It's their way of saying, I may not say it, but I'm here, I care, you matter. Tony Robbins often teaches that one of the human core needs is certainty. For avoidants, certainty is their anchor. It makes them feel safe in a world that's emotionally unpredictable. When they offer you their dependability, they're extending a piece of that anchor. In essence, they are saying, you can count on me in the only way I know how to show up. This behavior may not feel romantic in the traditional sense, but it's a foundational kind of love. It's the kind of love that shows up on time, that doesn't forget the details, that quietly makes sure everything's okay. It's not flashy, but it's real, and it's sustainable. What's particularly telling is how they show up when no one is watching. They won't make grand gestures to impress others or try to win love through performance, but they will silently make space for you in their world. They'll text you regularly, check in on how your day was, help you solve problems, and make sure your needs are met in small, consistent ways. That routine behavior is not just their comfort zone, it's their emotional language. They may not say, "I love you," but they are saying it every time they show up, every time they follow through, and every time they choose you through action instead of words. To someone with a more emotionally expressive love language, this can be difficult to decode. It may feel like something's missing, like a part of the emotional connection is being withheld. But the truth is, avoidants are often doing their best to love in a way that feels safe for them. It's not that they don't want to love more openly, it's that they've learned to be cautious with their hearts. And within that caution, consistency is the most honest and sustainable form of expression they can offer. It's not about withholding love, it's about managing the risk of emotional exposure while still showing up for someone they care about. Over time, that dependable presence builds something incredibly valuable: trust. When you know that someone will be there, even if they don't say much, even if they don't wear their heart on their sleeve, you begin to feel secure in the relationship. And that sense of emotional security is one of the most powerful forms of love that exists. For the avoidant, this is everything. Their love may not be loud, but it's steady. It may not overflow with emotion, but it won't disappear when things get hard. That consistency, that commitment, that quiet presence, it speaks louder than words ever could in their emotional vocabulary. So while you may never hear them say, "I love you," with ease, pay attention to how they show up, how they maintain connection, how they create reliability. In those subtle, steady behaviors lies the truth they may never verbalize. And in their world, consistency is not just comfort. It's love in its most dependable form. Avoidants are often misunderstood in relationships because their need for emotional distance is frequently interpreted as disinterest, coldness, or lack of love. But the truth is far more complex. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, taking space doesn't necessarily mean they're disconnecting or falling out of love. It often means they're overwhelmed by the intensity of their feelings or the closeness they're starting to experience. Emotional intimacy can feel threatening to someone who has built their entire emotional survival around self-reliance, control, and minimal dependence on others. So when emotions run high, their instinct is not to move closer, but to retreat. This withdrawal is a coping strategy, not a sign of detachment. Tony Robbins often talks about how we all develop patterns to meet our emotional needs, even when those patterns don't serve us in the long run. Avoidance pattern of distancing serves a purpose. It helps them regulate their emotional world, which they often experience as chaotic or unsafe when too much intimacy is involved. But just because they step away doesn't mean they stop feeling. In fact, many avoidants report feeling even more deeply than they let on. The problem is that those feelings are often so uncomfortable or confusing that they push them down and take physical or emotional distance as a way to regain control. This distancing can be incredibly painful for a partner who doesn't understand what's really happening. You may feel abandoned, dismissed, or unloved when an avoidant pulls away. It might seem like they've shut the door on connection. But what's often overlooked is what happens afterward when they start to come back. Their return may not be dramatic or obvious. It might look like a simple text message, a casual question, or a seemingly random check-in. But for an avoidant, that return is a massive emotional step. It's their way of saying asterisk, I'm still here. I didn't disappear because I stopped caring. I just needed space to feel safe again. Asterisk, what makes this behavior so revealing is how consistent it is. The push-pull pattern is not random. It's predictable once you understand the avoidant emotional rhythm. When they return, it's often in a subtle, almost apologetic way. They don't say asterisk, I missed you, asterisk, but their actions do. They start engaging again in the relationship, maybe not on a deep emotional level immediately, but in the ways they know how. They resume conversations, ask about your day, offer help, or simply make themselves available again. These behaviors are their way of reconnecting without exposing themselves to more vulnerability than they can handle. The reason avoidants don't say, I love you, during these moments isn't because they don't feel it. It's because they're afraid of what saying it might unlock inside of them. Love for them comes with the risk of losing autonomy, being judged, or feeling trapped, so they come back not with words, but with presence. They offer small gestures instead of declarations. These actions might go unnoticed if you're focused on verbal validation, but if you learn to read their behavior, you'll start to see that their return is actually one of the most honest ways they express love. It's not about what they say, it's about the fact that they came back at all. Responding to an avoidance return with pressure or emotional demands can unintentionally push them away again. They often fear that their re-entry will lead to confrontation or expectations they can't meet. That's why it's important to allow space for reconnection to happen naturally. When they sense that you're not going to punish them for needing distance, they start to feel safer with closeness. And over time, this can lead to longer periods of connection and shorter retreats. It builds trust not just in the relationship, but in their own ability to stay connected without losing themselves. So the next time an avoidant takes space, try not to assume the worst. Watch what happens afterward. If they come back, even in a quiet, indirect way, it means something. It means they've been thinking about you. It means they're trying to re-engage. That re-engagement, no matter how understated, is a behavior that says asterisk, I love you, asterisk, in a way they may never speak aloud. It's not rejection, it's regulation, and their return isn't random. It's emotional courage, quietly offered in the only way they know how. For avoidant individuals, expressing love verbally can feel overwhelming or even impossible, but their need to show love doesn't disappear. It simply takes a different form. Often that form is practical. They express care by doing things, by being useful, by solving problems. This behavior isn't accidental or casual. It's deeply tied to how they learn to connect with others in a way that doesn't require them to confront their own vulnerability. Practical help becomes their love language. It feels safer, more controlled, and more manageable than verbal or emotional intimacy. So instead of saying, I love you, they may fix something that's broken, offer to run errands when you're tired, or take care of things before you even notice they needed to be done. This isn't just a habit. It's a window into how avoidants build emotional connection without putting their emotional walls at risk. To them, taking action is a way to offer love without surrendering the control that emotional conversations often threaten. Tony Robbins emphasizes that people meet their emotional needs through different behaviors that help them feel significance, connection, or certainty. For avoidance, being helpful or useful meets several of these needs at once. It allows them to feel significant by providing value, connected without having to dive into emotional waters, and in control because their role is clear and structured. This kind of love is easy to miss if you're focused on more traditionally expressive forms. You might be waiting for verbal affirmations or romantic gestures and not realize that when your avoidant partner silently fills your gas tank, brings you a coffee just the way you like it, or makes sure you have what you need for the next day, those are all statements of affection. Those are their ways of saying asterisk, I'm thinking about you, I care, I want to ease your burden, asterisk for them, love is service, not performance. It's presence in the background, not attention in the spotlight. There's also a deeper reason why practical acts are safer for avoidance. They come with lower emotional risk. Words can be misinterpreted, emotional vulnerability can be exploited, but fixing a problem or completing a task is clear, measurable, and safe. They know that action will be useful, appreciated, and less likely to trigger a reaction that makes them feel exposed. So, when they do something for you, especially without being asked, they are reaching out in the only way that feels emotionally secure for them. They may not say how they feel, but they show it through thoughtful, intentional acts of service. Over time, if these acts go unnoticed or unappreciated, avoidance may feel disconnected or even rejected. Their version of emotional investment isn't loud, but it's real. When someone doesn't recognize it, they may assume it's not valuable or meaningful, reinforcing their internal belief that emotional intimacy leads to rejection or misunderstanding. But when their partner begins to notice and acknowledge these behaviors when you say thank you, when you see the effort, they start to feel safe. They begin to trust that they can connect without changing who they are. That kind of validation opens doors to deeper connection, even if it still happens slowly and on their own terms. If you want to understand how an avoidant says I love you, pay close attention to the way they take care of you when you're stressed, tired, sick, or overwhelmed. Notice how they anticipate your needs, even if they don't talk about them. Watch how they manage logistics or protect you from things that might cause you discomfort. All of this is intentional. They are trying to hold space for you without using words. They are trying to say something through behavior, through movement, through service. And for them, that effort is emotionally significant. It's not just kindness, it's intimacy. In a world that often teaches us to measure love by how often it's said, avoidants offer a different model, love measured by how often it's done. Their version of love might not come with flowers or poetry, but it's built into everyday routines, into reliability, into showing up when it matters. These acts may not feel like a confession, but they are often rooted in deep emotional commitment. Understanding that means learning to read between the lines to see that a repaired door, a silent check-in, or a well-timed solution is not just a task. It's a message, and that message, without needing to be said, is asterisk. I love you the best way I know how. Asterisk. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, personal space is sacred. It's more than just a preference. It's a vital part of how they manage their internal world and maintain emotional balance. Alone time isn't just enjoyed, it's necessary. It provides safety, clarity, and a sense of control that helps them avoid the emotional overwhelm that closeness often brings. So when an avoidant starts integrating you into their routine, when they begin to let you into the protected zones of their daily life, it's a deeply significant gesture. It may not come with romantic declarations or vulnerable conversations, but the act of sharing time, space, and structure is their way of saying, asterisk, you matter enough to be part of my world, asterisk, this inclusion might be subtle. They might invite you to join them in something they typically do alone, working out, running errands, watching a show, or preparing meals. They may not explicitly say it's special, but for them, allowing you to be part of their private routines is no small thing. It means they're not just tolerating your presence. They're welcoming it in the one place they've always felt most in control. Avoidants are very protective of their time and space because these areas allow them to function without emotional strain. Sharing that sacred rhythm of their day means they are shifting their definition of safety to include you in it. Tony Robbins often talks about how the quality of your life is directly related to the quality of your relationships. For avoidance, the quality of a relationship is tied not to emotional intensity, but to emotional stability. They don't want to lose themselves in another person, but when they feel secure, they're more likely to make space for someone else in their life slowly and deliberately. That's why you might see them begin to invite you into more practical, mundane parts of their day. These aren't random interactions. They're tests, signs, and openings. Letting you walk alongside them in the everyday is their way of showing, asterisk, I trust you with the parts of my life I don't share with everyone else. Asterisk, this shift doesn't usually happen quickly. At first, they may keep their routines rigid, their plans solo, their days carefully controlled, but as their comfort with you grows, they begin to bend that structure ever so slightly. Maybe they adjust their schedule to spend time with you. Maybe they plan something around your availability instead of just their own. These adjustments, however minor they may seem on the surface, carry a lot of emotional weight for an avoidant. They're surrendering small pieces of their independence not because they have to, but because they want to. And that choice is one of the most honest expressions of affection they can offer. For the person on the receiving end, it's important to understand that being included in an avoidance routine is not about convenience. It's about emotional acceptance. You're being invited into a world they've carefully constructed to keep their emotions manageable. And instead of keeping that world locked down, they're unlocking it, bit by bit, to let you inside. They may not explain what this means. In fact, they probably won't. But if you recognize the significance, if you treat it with respect rather than pressure, you'll build even more trust. And as that trust builds, so does the depth of connection. These moments of routine sharing may never look dramatic or emotionally charged. They may seem ordinary, sitting silently in the same room, going through weekly tasks together, or quietly sharing a meal without conversation. But these are not emotional voids. They are spaces of safety. They are proof that your presence is not only accepted, it's preferred. That kind of silent closeness is powerful for an avoidant. It lets them experience intimacy without pressure, without fear of engulfment, and without the need to constantly explain themselves. It gives them the emotional oxygen they need to stay connected while remaining grounded. And so, when an avoidant starts folding you into their data, a world, recognize it for what it is. It's not passive, it's not meaningless. It's a deep and intentional form of connection. It's their way of saying, asterisk, I want you around not just when it's exciting or romantic, but in the quiet spaces of my life too. Asterisk, and that, for someone who values space above all else, is a rare and beautiful form of love. Avoidants place a high value on emotional independence and control. Their comfort zone is built around routines, predictability, and boundaries that protect them from vulnerability. They often retreat from emotional closeness not because they don't care, but because staying in control feels safer than being exposed. So when an avoidant willingly steps out of that emotional safe zone, when they make sacrifices, show up in emotionally uncomfortable situations, or stretch themselves in ways that push against their usual instincts, it speaks volumes. It's not a casual decision. It's an internal negotiation that often sounds like, asterisk, this is hard for me, but you're worth the discomfort. Asterisk, that single behavior is one of the most telling, powerful ways they communicate love. They may not use emotional language or participate easily in deep conversations, but if they are choosing to stay when things get intense, if they are standing by you during emotionally heavy moments, that's their version of an I love you. They don't do this for everyone. They won't inconvenience themselves for people who don't matter to them. Their instinct is to protect their emotional energy, and when they step out of that pattern for you, it means you've reached a level of significance that overrides their need to self-protect. Tony Robbins often says love is not just a feeling, it's a decision, and for avoidants, choosing closeness when their natural reflex is to pull away is a decision made out of love, not comfort. This behavior shows up in subtle but impactful ways. Maybe they agree to attend an emotionally vulnerable event with you, like a family gathering, a funeral, or a therapy session, spaces they would normally avoid at all costs. Maybe they sit quietly with you while you cry, unsure of what to say but refusing to walk away. Maybe they express frustration with themselves for not being more expressive, yet still try to listen or hold space for you even when it feels unnatural. These moments of effort are not small for someone who prefers distance. They are quiet acts of emotional bravery, steps they take because your relationship matters more to them than their comfort. It's essential to understand that avoidants often feel emotionally flooded when they're asked to express love in ways that feel too vulnerable. So, when they challenge their own emotional programming by staying connected, showing up, or making time for a conversation that requires openness, they are pushing through internal resistance. That inner tension isn't a sign they don't care. It's proof they're trying to care in ways they've never been taught to feel safe in. That effort, even if it appears clumsy or hesitant, is a real-time expression of love in action. This is also why progress with avoidance can feel uneven. They may lean in one day and pull back the next, not because they're playing games, but because they're regulating their emotional comfort while still trying to stay connected. Love, for them, is not a free fall, it's a series of measured steps toward connection, and each step, especially the ones that come with discomfort, reflects growth and emotional investment. If they're willing to feel uneasy in order to maintain closeness, that's not weakness, it's commitment. They are making room for love in a place that once felt too dangerous to open. Recognizing and appreciating these acts without demanding more can build even greater trust. When avoidants feel seen for the effort they make, even when it falls short of traditional emotional expression, they begin to believe that love doesn't have to mean loss of self. They start to feel safe enough to take bigger emotional risks. And over time, this creates the kind of emotional bond that's built not just on shared experiences, but on mutual growth and deep earned trust. So when an avoidant chooses connection over comfort, when they stay instead of running, when they do something emotionally difficult just to support you, that is not random. That is their heart stretching toward you in the only way it knows how. It's their way of saying, this is hard for me, but I'm still here because I care. And that choice, repeated over time, becomes a love story written in resilience, patience, and quiet emotional courage. Growth is never accidental for an avoidant. It is a deliberate, often painstaking process that requires them to challenge the very strategies that have kept them emotionally safe for years. When you see an avoidant partner stretching beyond familiar routines, experimenting with new ways to communicate, setting up time to talk rather than evade, or even learning the language of emotion they once dismissed, you are witnessing one of the most powerful, albeit quiet, declarations of love they can offer. Tony Robbins teaches that progress equals happiness, and that all meaningful relationships thrive on continual growth. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, progress means inching toward vulnerability while simultaneously wrestling the instinct to retreat. Each small step is a high-stakes emotional investment, undertaken not simply for personal development, but to strengthen a bond they now deem worth the risk. You might notice this growth first in subtleties, the way they begin to ask more thoughtful questions about your feelings rather than sticking to safe, factual conversations, the way they catch themselves mid-deflection and choose to stay present instead of shutting down, the way they tentatively share a memory or insecurity they once swore would never leave their lips. None of these changes happen overnight, and they rarely come with fanfare. Avoidants dislike dramatic transformations. They favor incremental, sustainable shifts that feel manageable. But each new behavior is telling. It signals that they are actively working to expand the narrow emotional bandwidth they had previously guarded so tightly. They are not merely tolerating closeness, they are trying to master it. What drives this willingness to grow is a recalibration of their internal cost-benefit analysis. In the past, self-protection outweighed connection. The price of vulnerability felt too high, the risk too great. Your presence, however, slowly tips that balance. Love begins to reshape their mental equations. When they realize that staying the same could mean losing you, or at least stagnating the relationship, they start to view growth as the lesser risk. This shift is profound because it shows that the relationship has risen on their priority list, edging out long-standing fears. Robbins often says people change either out of desperation or inspiration, and avoidance change is usually a blend of both. The potential pain of losing a meaningful connection desperation combines with the inspiring glimpse of how fulfilling closeness could be if they can tolerate it. One of the clearest indicators of this growth as love is their willingness to seek information or help they once rejected. Maybe they begin reading articles about attachment styles, listening to relationship podcasts, or even agreeing to therapy, something that might have felt like an admission of weakness before. They are educating themselves not simply out of intellectual curiosity, but out of a desire to show up better for you. They are, in essence, learning a new emotional language so they can communicate what words used to fail to convey. When they share these resources or mention insights they picked up, they are not flaunting knowledge. They are offering a window into their internal transformation, implicitly saying, "I am working on me for us." Growth also manifests in how they handle conflict. Where they once might have stonewalled or disappeared to avoid confrontation, they now circle back sooner, even if nervously. They may stumble through apologies, use imperfect language, or take breaks but return to continue the conversation rather than letting it die in silence. These halting attempts are not signs of indifference. They are signs of effort. Conflict becomes training ground for new relational muscles, and every time they choose repair over retreat, they reinforce a neural pathway that makes future closeness slightly less daunting. It's important to recognize that this journey is seldom linear. Avoidants often oscillate between new behaviors and old defenses, especially under stress. Progress may come in spurts, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Patience and acknowledgement of their strides, however small, nourish the very courage that fuels continued growth. Robbins notes that what gets rewarded gets repeated. When you notice and appreciate an avoidance attempts, you help wire those changes into lasting habits. Your validation becomes positive reinforcement, turning raw effort into sustained transformation. This evolving willingness to grow does more than improve day-to-day interactions. It redefines their self-concept. They move from seeing themselves as lone operators to seeing themselves as partners capable of interdependence. That identity shift is monumental. It affects every future choice, how they allocate time, how they plan for the long term, how they weigh personal comfort against shared goals. By choosing growth, they are effectively choosing the relationship over long-standing self-protective narratives. It is an implicit vow, whispered rather than spoken outright, that says, I intend to keep showing up, getting better, and loving you in broader, braver ways. So when you witness an avoidant partner experimenting with vulnerability, taking a class on communication, sharing deeper feelings, renegotiating boundaries for more closeness, or simply staying present during a tough talk, understand the gravity of what you're seeing. Each effort is love translated into action, a tangible expression of commitment that costs them far more than it might cost someone with a different attachment style. Their growth is not only personal, it is relational, driven by the desire to build a future that includes you. And in the avoidant lexicon, that sustained, often uncomfortable self-expansion is the clearest, most enduring way of saying, I love you, and I'm proving it by becoming someone who can love you even better.